Player burnout for Eve Online is, well, complex for an extremely complex game. One great thing about the most deep and fleshed out game in existence is it allows you to play the long game for years. It builds motivation, expectation, and often great ambitions or delusions of grandeur. Of course, if someone actually achieves their goals in the game, there is a feeling of reward that is unmatched in any other game. But if you fail, the feeling of loss is also unmatched in any other game. Burnout in Eve comes in different varieties. However, there is a huge difference between burnout and a break. A break is a healthy pause in your gameplay, sometimes to explore another style of gameplay, or a period of time when you do not play at all. Breaks are necessary and unavoidable. They often have to do with real-life circumstances. A break also means that you're likely to return to the game. It normally has no negative connotation. Burnout is not like that. Burnout, especially in Eve, can come with a lot of negative emotions. Most commonly, this is boredom, low morale, and apathy. They may even have to do with relationships with other players in the game that have gone sour, and you would rather not return to deal with it. Some people, after playing for years non-stop, burn out and never come back. Sometimes new players will play for a few months, burn out, and never come back. Some people burn out every month, but then come back every other month. The length of a burnout, as well as the likelihood of returning to the game, varies widely. I personally have been dealing with Eve Online burnout for several months. This is honestly common for me. My usual pattern is to play for something like 4 to 6 months at a time, and then burn out or sometimes break for 2 to 4 months at a time. But so far I have always come back. Occasionally coming back isn't certain depending on the negativity or the cause of the burnout. The causes for my own burnouts have run the spectrum. There are some reasons that I'm sure many other players share. One reason is that CCP Games makes a change to Eve that messes up your particular style of gameplay. Another could be that some other game is offering you something that Eve, at least in that period of time, is just not delivering. A very common reason, which has plagued me in the past, is some kind of failed goal. Perhaps your stations that you've labored to deploy have all been wrecked by some organization with more firepower than you can handle, or someone just stole all your stuff out of your wormhole citadel. There are dozens of terrible in-game things that can happen to a player that will utterly crush their morale. Related to this, another reason players burn out is the tedious gameplay or grind. Eve sometimes sort of strings you along in a particular direction so that in your mind you're about to achieve great things, but players soon find out that to achieve that, they must repeat the same actions over and over, which can go on for hours, days, weeks of the same thing, and the goals remain ever distant. All the while, the rich and powerful players are getting the spotlight because they're showing off their accomplishments. Most players may never achieve what they aspire to simply because of the tedious grind. Now, I already mentioned strained relationships with other players as a possible cause for burnout, which may also be related to a failed leadership situation for the player. Meaning either their leader has quit or they are a leader that has been demotivated. Perhaps that leader tried to get their alliance to form a defense fleet to fight off an attack on their valuable moon mining refinery, but for whatever reason, often beyond her control, few or none of her courtmates step up to the plate to fight. This kind of thing can be crushing and almost always will cause that player to at least take a break, if not burn out. My particular burnout cause this time is different, and it has to do with the inherent nature of Eve's gameplay. For the past several months, I had been going through a visually creative phase in my YouTube career, and I've been hungry for visual inspiration, preferably from a game if I can get it. Now, don't get me wrong, there are aspects of EVE Online that are visually stunning. The ship models are fantastic, as are the little animations, weapons effects, engines, warp gates, the inside of stations, all of it top-notch visual quality and creativity. But guess what? More often than not, all of this eye candy is completely irrelevant to gameplay. It doesn't matter where your railgun turrets are pointed, or whether your engines are glowing hot with afterburners. It isn't important that your hull is burning. The complexity of that station you call home is also irrelevant. These buoy lights outside the station? Not important. It is only the data that is important to good gameplay. In other words, to play the game effectively, even in an intense battle in a PvP situation, you should never be distracted by the eye candy that is your ship. In fact, it would serve you better to be zoomed out from your ship and focus on this and this. Visually interesting? No. It is literally a semi-transparent spreadsheet. When I play a lot of other games, this is not a problem. In fact, the visual representation of the actual objects are actually very, very important to effective gameplay, and every time I would get back into Eve, I would feel a sense of dread every time I had to look at that damned soulless bland overview again. This may be a topic for an entirely different video, but let's get on to the topic of how to actually recover from burnout. Because 99% of the time, no matter the cause, you can return to the game and go on playing for a good long while. Eve is so complex that there are dozens of in-depth styles of gameplay, so much so that some aspects of the game you may have never experienced even though you've played for years. First, and most obvious, never return in totality to your previous style of gameplay. If you burnt out rather than just took a break, it means you needed a change. If you did nothing but mine asteroids and burnt out, you definitely need to do something else. Maybe try a little nullsec ratting, maybe some NPC missioning on the low end of intensity, or some low-sec PvP on the high end of intensity. On the other extreme of things, if you ran an alliance made up of hundreds, even thousands of players, and were embroiled in an intense war with others, well, that sounds exciting, right? No, that greatly depends on the outcome. Being overwhelmed by the intensity of the game can definitely cause burnout. Perhaps you should ramp it down a little when you get back in. Maybe try some solo PvP or the new Triglavian content with just one or two trusted friends. Those hundreds of nerds can actually get along without you. You do not have to wear that ball and chain just for a game. Another thing that will really help is to come up with some new goals, and they must, absolutely must, be achievable. When I was a new player, I thought I would become this master of some great empire or alliance in Eve. Well, it's been 10 years and that hasn't happened yet. Later, my goals were tamped down a little bit, but many burn out for much smaller goals than this. This is actually kind of a paradox because one of the great motivators of Eve is that you could somehow someday achieve these great amazing goals like becoming the big cheese kahuna nerd of a space empire or whatever. But you know what Mama always asked me when faced with this kind of thing? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, of course. If you do have a grand ambition in mind, if you are shooting for the stars, there is absolutely nothing at all wrong with that. But if you are not already achieving them in the present, and if you want to achieve those goals without them becoming another delusion of grandeur, first, do not share these ambitions with anyone, even your best friends. If you have the discipline to keep those ambitions as your secret motivation, your secret fuel, locked away in your secret little vault, you will be much more likely to go far with it. And with that, although I am no longer the same, I once again play Eve Online. Very nice. They may even have to do with relationships with other players in the game that have gone sour. Retake. My usual pattern is to play for 3 to 6... Retake. Visually interesting? No. It is little... Retake. When I was a new player, I thought I would... Retake. When I was kind of a new player, I thought I would... Very nice.